Today, ladies and gentlemen, it is Tuesday, the 21st of May. This is Community Radio Networks, and we have all the information that you need to take on the day today. And we will have the world news, the financial news, and some stories from the annals of history that happened on today's date, all coming up for you. Stay with us right here on Community Radio Networks, and we'll start with the world news first. This is Community Radio Networks, the world news, read by Shabnam Madgil. Funeral ceremonies have begun in Iran for President Ibrahim Raisi, Foreign Minister Hossein Amir Abdullahian, and other victims of Sunday's helicopter crash. Thousands of government supporters flocked to the start of the ceremony in the northwestern city of Tabriz to bid farewell. Further mourning ceremonies are planned in the religious stronghold and pilgrimage city of Qom, as well as in the capital of Tehran. Raisi is to be buried on Thursday in the Shiite center of his hometown of Mashhad at the shrine of Imam Reza, the 8th Imam of Shia Islam. Raisi and Amir Abdullahian were killed in this helicopter crash with 7 other occupants. They went down in dense fog in the mountains while traveling back from a meeting with the president of Azerbaijan. Today will begin the funeral prayers and a procession in Tabriz, the largest city in the mountainous northwestern region of Iran where the chopper crashed. Later in the day, the bodies of the victims will be transferred to the holy Shiite city of Qom, where many of the clerics who make up Iran's theocratic elite are trained before then heading to the capital of Tehran. Large ceremonies planned in Tehran's enormous Grand Musalla Mosque tomorrow, and Raisi's body will then be moved to the historic Imam Reza shrine. There is no indication what might have caused the crash and why so many senior Iranian government officials were traveling in a single decades-old helicopter. As the Iranians gather today to mourn at the funerary procession of President Ibrahim Raisi in Tabriz, the capital of East Azerbaijan province, where he died unexpectedly in this helicopter crash. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, whose ultimate authority in Iran, declared 5 days of national mourning and assigned Vice President Mohammad Mukhbar to assume interim duties and the elections. Iran will hold their presidential elections on the 28th of June, following this death of Ibrahim Raisi in the helicopter crash over the weekend. Vice President Mukhbar taking on the role of president in the meantime, as per the constitution of the Islamic Republic. Unclear if he himself will run. The U.S. said that arch-enemy Iran sought assistance over the helicopter crash that killed President Raisi, as Washington meanwhile offered condolences despite saying he had blood on his hands. The State Department said Iran, which has had no diplomatic relations with Washington since the aftermath of the 1979 Islamic Revolution, reached out after Raisi's aging chopper crashed in foggy weather. The helicopter that crashed with Iran's president on board was U.S.-made and may have been in service since before the 1979 Islamic Revolution. And it is said that President Raisi and his entourage were flying on this U.S.-made Bell 212 helicopter per Iran International when it crashed into the hillside in Iran's mountainous northwest, killing all on board. U.S. officials went on the offensive after the International Criminal Court filed arrest warrants against 2 top Israeli leaders over the war in Gaza, a move that Congress and the White House slammed for equating Israel's conduct with the Palestinian militant group's October 7th attack. It is President Biden who slammed the International Criminal Court's prosecutors' application for arrest warrants for senior Israeli officials, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, calling the move outrageous. A spokesperson for the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has denounced requests from the ICC prosecutor for these arrest warrants for Netanyahu, Gallant, and 3 Hamas leaders. France said it supported the independence of the International Criminal Court, whose prosecutors requested these arrest warrants. And China said it hoped the International Criminal Court would uphold an objective position after a prosecutor requested these arrest warrants. Israel and Hamas engaged in heavy fighting in the Gaza Strip. Both angrily rejected moves to arrest their leaders for war crimes made before an international court. And the International Criminal Court's prosecutor Karim Khan Khan said he had applied for arrest warrants for top Israeli and Hamas leaders over this conflict. The International Criminal Court Prosecutor's Office requesting these yesterday. There is no end to the bloodshed in Gaza as dozens of people have been killed by Israeli air attacks in Jabalia in the north as well as in Rafah in the south. The U.S. Central Command has said more than 569 metric tons of humanitarian assistance has been delivered so far across a temporary floating pier to Gaza, but not all the aid has reached warehouses. Food and medicine for Palestinians as Gaza is piling up in Egypt because the Rafah crossing remains closed and there has been no aid delivered to the UN warehouse from a U.S.-built pier for 2 days. Noted human rights lawyer Amal Clooney is trending on social media after it was revealed that she assisted the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court in evaluating evidence of suspected war crimes and crimes against humanity committed in Israel and Gaza. A defense witness in Donald Trump's hush money case, whom the judge threatened to remove from the trial over his behavior, will return to the stand today as the trial nears its end. His lawyers are hoping Robert Costello's testimony will help undermine the credibility of a key prosecution witness, Trump fixer turned foe Michael Cohen. But Costello angered the judge Juan Merchan yesterday by making comments under his breath, rolling his eyes and calling the whole exercise ridiculous, prompting the judge to briefly kick reporters out of the courtroom to admonish him. Former Donald Trump attorney Michael Cohen admitted to jurors in the Republican's hush money trial that he stole tens of thousands of dollars from Trump's company as defense lawyers seized on the star witness's misdeeds to attack his credibility. His admission in court that he stole from the Trump organization further damaged and disbarred the attorney's credibility and could lead, at the very least, to a deadlocked jury that cannot reach a verdict. Donald Trump's New York criminal trial briefly descended into chaos when the judge became infuriated by the defense witness's behavior, and pandemonium broke out between journalists and court officers as lawyer Robert Costello, called up to testify by Trump's team, exasperated normally unflappable Judge Merchan to constantly griping at his rulings. And we do also have Scottie Scheffler's arraignment on multiple charges stemming from an incident prior to the second round of the PGA Championship that has been delayed until the 3rd of June. His attorney, Steve Romines, told ESPN that a not guilty plea will be entered on the new date in Louisville. The arrangement was originally scheduled for today. And the presidential primaries that Joe Biden and Donald Trump have already clinched will move closer to their end today. Voters in 2 states, Kentucky and Oregon, will get their chance to weigh in symbolic decisions that provide a few more delegates to the national conventions and a gut check on where the Democratic and Republican bases stand towards their standard bearers. A South Lake plastic surgeon here in North Texas with a long disciplinary history has turned himself in at the Tarrant County Jail on a charge he violated the Texas Medical Act. Dr. John Verhallen was quickly released on a $15,000 bond. South Lake police said detectives worked with the Texas Medical Board on this investigation. Records reveal that his license was suspended last August after the board said his practice of medicine posed a continuing threat to the public welfare, and found that he continued to practice medicine despite an order from June of 22 that restricted him from practicing plastic or cosmetic surgery and required him to have a chaperone anytime he performed an exam on a female patient. The U.S. Supreme Court rejected an appeal by a Canadian former Guantanamo detainee of his convictions for war crimes committed in Afghanistan. Toronto-born Umar Khadr was 15 years old when he was captured on an Afghan battlefield in 2002 and sent to the U.S. military prison in Cuba. He pleaded guilty in 2010 to murdering a U.S. soldier in violation of the laws of war and attempted murder, conspiracy, providing material support for terrorism, as well as spying. Mexico's most powerful and ruthless cartels operate in all 50 states and clash in American cities, according to a U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration report. The Jalisco and Sinaloa cartels have flooded major U.S. cities with meth and fentanyl and use violence to protect their turf. The U.S. said that Russia last week launched a satellite that could be part of weaponizing space, a possible future global trend that members of the UN Security Council condemned even as they failed to pass a measure against it. Russia has claimed that Ukraine used French and U.S.-supplied missiles in the attack on one of its border regions. And Germany's foreign minister has arrived in Kyiv today in the latest public display of support for Ukraine by its Western partners, although deliveries of promised weapons and ammunition from NATO countries like Germany have been slow and have left Ukraine vulnerable to a recent Russian push along parts of the front line. The U.S. top military leader said that Russian President Putin has opened another front in the Kharkiv region of Ukraine, home to the country's second-largest city. We have Ukrainian President Zelensky labeled a legitimate military target by Dmitry Medvedev, the head of Russia's Security Council and former Russian president. In an interview with TASS yesterday, he described Zelensky as the leader of a hostile political regime, stating that the legitimacy of Zelensky's presidency holds no significance for Moscow. Wars and conflicts should not influence participation in the Games, which need to convey a message of hope and support, and Israel should not be sanctioned. This according to Andrew Parsons, the head of the International Paralympic Committee. And this news being reported from Paris. Rishi Sunak said it was a day of shame for the British state as victims of the infected blood scandal were finally given an apology. The Prime Minister said the worst treatment scandal in NHS history had resulted from a moral failure at the heart of our national life, in which doctors, civil servants and ministers had put reputations above patient safety, and thousands of people were infected with HIV and hepatitis C by contaminated blood products used in the NHS between the 1970s and the 1990s. And a plan for compensation will be announced today, expected to top £10 billion. A court in Greece has abandoned the trial of 9 Egyptian men accused of causing the biggest migrant shipwreck in the Mediterranean Sea for a decade. The judges in the southern port city of Kalamata ruled that they did not have jurisdiction to hear the case on the grounds the vessel sank in international waters, and it is feared more than 600 people drowned last June when an overcrowded fishing boat, the Adriana, sank on its way to Europe from Libya. A women's prison near Naples was evacuated as a precaution today following a 4.4 magnitude quake with an epicenter at an active volcano west of the southern Italian port city that forced hundreds of residents to sleep in tents or cars. No injury and only minor damage was reported following this tremor. French President Emmanuel Macron is making a surprise trip to riot-hit New Caledonia, the French Pacific territory that has been gripped by days of deadly unrest and where indigenous people have long sought independence. Australia and New Zealand sent airplanes to New Caledonia today to begin bringing home stranded citizens from the violence-racked French South Pacific territory. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the World News on Community Radio Networks. Kim Jong-un was desperate to get rid of his nuclear weapons and said he would only ever use them defensively. This according to a former South Korean president in a memoir. Moon Jae-in, who oversaw the unprecedented summits between Kim and former President Trump, wrote that the North Korean leader repeatedly and desperately made clear that Pyongyang did not intend to use such weapons and was frustrated by international mistrust. China today scolded South Korea and Japanese lawmakers for visiting Taiwan, despite its strong opposition, chiding both neighbors for attending Taiwan's so-called inauguration ceremony of the leader. Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te, regarded by China as a separatist, was officially sworn in yesterday after winning a January election. And supporters of Taiwan's new president are protesting an attempt by the China-leaning opposition to curtail his powers. Lawmakers from the Kuomintang today kicked off the final steps towards passing a law that would require President Lai Ching-te to deliver an address to them every year, appear separately to answer questions and provide a range of documents when asked. The Philippines blamed Chinese fishermen for a massive loss of giant clams in the disputed shoal controlled by China's Coast Guard in the South China Sea and urged an international inquiry into the amount of environmental damage in that area. The Philippine Coast Guard presented surveillance photographs of Chinese fishermen harvesting large numbers of giant clams for a number of years in a lagoon at the Scarborough shore, but said signs of such activities stopped in March 2019. The Philippines and the U.S. agreed today to train Filipinos how to build and operate nuclear power plants as the Southeast Asian country seeks to boost its electricity supply. And a passenger has died and many were injured when a Singapore Airlines Boeing 777 headed from London to Singapore encountered severe turbulence en route. The aircraft diverted to Bangkok, where it landed today. Confirming this, Singapore Airlines said in a statement that Flight 321 operating from London's Heathrow to Singapore encountered severe turbulence en route. The U.S. responded to a recently published article by New York Times about the Muslim community in India and said that Washington is committed to upholding universal respect for the right to freedom of religion and has engaged many countries, including India. U.S. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller addressed a press conference and said, "We are deeply committed to promoting and protecting universal respect for the right to freedom of religion or belief of all around the world." The Wrestling Federation of India has decided to exempt the 6 Olympic quota winners from selection trials for the upcoming Paris Games. However, their forms and fitness will be evaluated at the forthcoming ranking series event and the subsequent training camp in Hungary. Vice President Jagdeep Dhankar is likely to represent India at the funeral of Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi, who died in that helicopter crash. And a staggering 1,208 sixes in 70 matches have been struck in the current edition of the IPL. Leading the count with 160 in 13 matches is none other than Sunrisers Hyderabad, whose batting has personified their fearless approach and helped them climb from bottom last year to second this year, that position in the table. Led by the dynamic Australian pacer Pat Cummins, it is the Sunrisers Hyderabad that will be eager to go the distance this time around. But first, they will have to cross a hurdle in the form of the Kolkata Knight Riders in the first qualifier in Ahmedabad today. A voter turnout of 69.34% was recorded in the 5 Lok Sabha and 35 assembly seats in Odisha, where polling was held yesterday. And the second round of simultaneous elections were held in Aska, Bolangir, Kandhamal, Sundargarh and Bargarh Lok Sabha constituencies and 35 assembly segments under these parliamentary seats. Delhi has remained in the grip of an unrelenting heat wave, and the Indian Meteorological Department has issued a red alert for extreme temperatures until Friday. At 47.4 degrees Celsius, Najafgarh in southwest Delhi was the hottest spot in the country. Indian authorities in the capital have ordered schools shut early for the summer holidays after this severe heat wave. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif declared a day of national mourning in the country for today to pay respects to Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi and other dignitaries who passed away in that helicopter crash. And as over 500 students came back from Kyrgyzstan via special flights which landed in Lahore and Islamabad, the government assured them that it would facilitate their return to the Central Asian state once the alarming situation in the capital stabilizes. After a mob targeted foreign students in Bishkek, the capital of Kyrgyzstan, Pakistani students, due to fear and panic, started their departure from the country. Opener Danny Wyatt played a swashbuckling knock to help England women beat Pakistan by 34 runs in the third and final T20 international at Leeds. And following objections raised by the Pakistan Football Federation Normalization Committee over the lighting at the Jinnah Stadium for Pakistan's 2026 FIFA World Cup qualifier against Saudi Arabia next month, the Pakistan Sports Board has insisted that everything will be fixed for the match to go on as scheduled. And a local court acquitted former Prime Minister Imran Khan and other PTI leaders in the cases nearly 2 years after they were registered for alleged violence, riots, obstructing public service, and mischief by fire or explosive substance with intent to cause damage during the May 25th Azadi March. The Punjab Assembly passed the Defamation Bill 2024, rejecting all amendments proposed by the opposition amid protests by the PTI-backed Sunni Ittihad Council and journalists covering parliamentary proceedings. The bill allows special tribunal to penalize those involved in drafting or disseminating fake news. And opposition lawmakers tear up copies of the bill, and in the press gallery sees a walkout against the hasty adoption of what they called black law. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all I have in the world news for you, but we do have your financial news coming up in a separate segment. Give me a minute on that and I'll get that for you. Let's get you now your financial news that you need to know for today. And today, ladies and gentlemen, is Tuesday, the 21st of May. The Nasdaq closed at a record high yesterday, and gold has jumped to an all-time high as investors weighed hawkish statements from the Federal Reserve against evidence of cooling U.S. inflation. The price of gold has hit a record high as the shock death of Iranian President Raisi in that helicopter crash boosted support for the precious metal seen as a haven investment. Copper also struck an all-time peak, and silver jumped to the highest level in more than 11 years, with markets generally gaining from a bright economic outlook. Gold has already hit a series of record highs this year, trimming gains as traders booked profits after prices surged to this record on increasing optimism over the Federal Reserve's monetary policy and rising geopolitical tensions in the Middle East. Bullion was slightly higher in early New York trading after earlier jumping as much as 1.4% to hit 2,450.07, which surpassed a previous intraday high reached in April. Traders are pricing in a big move for Nvidia's shares after the chipmaker reports earnings tomorrow, though expectations for volatility are more muted than in the past. U.S. option markets show Nvidia's options are primed for an 8.7% swing in either direction by the end of this week. Microsoft is going all in on AI for the PC. The company announced a new category of PCs called Copilot Plus PCs, a new variety of computers equipped with so-called AI PC chips and running Microsoft's latest version of Windows 11 and its Copilot AI software. Bloomingdale's owner Macy's raised its annual profit forecast today, signaling that efforts to reduce costs by closing underperforming stores and trimming jobs were starting to pay off. Shares of the New York-based company were up 3% before the bell this morning, after it also beat first-quarter profit estimates. Macy's in February decided to shutter about 150 stores through 2026 as part of a new plan, which is expected to help save $100 million in cost this year. The company is also opening 15 Bloomingdale's locations and at least 30 new Blue Mercury stores as it banks on its better-performing brands to drive growth. Lowe's companies reported a lower-than-expected drop in quarterly sales today, helped by more small-scale repairs undertaken by inflation-hit Americans who have otherwise cut back on big-ticket discretionary home improvement projects. And the North Carolina-based company's shares rose about 2.5% before the bell today, after Lowe's also reaffirmed its annual sales and profit target. Media giants made more headway on the path to streaming profitability this earnings season, and over the past 2 years, price hikes and password-sharing crackdowns, ad-supported tiers, and mass layoffs have all shaken up the industry and brought companies closer to streaming profits. But the majority of companies still don't make money in those divisions, and investors remain skeptical that profit can be sustained. Take Disney as one example. The company turned a surprise profit within its direct-to-consumer entertainment division in its most recent quarter, and the segment, which includes Disney Plus and Hulu, posted operating income of $47 million compared to a loss of $587 million in the prior year period. New York Attorney General Letitia James is setting with crypto lender Genesis for $2 billion to make defrauded investors whole again. Genesis filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection last January in Manhattan federal court. And Jamie Dimon has long joked that his retirement is 5 years away, no matter when he's asked. But not yesterday. The chief executive officer of JP Morgan Chase & Company told shareholders the timetable is not 5 years anymore in response to a question about how long he planned to remain CEO. The largest U.S. bank is well on the way with its succession plans, he said during the firm's investor day. And the question of who might steward the firm after Dimon, who has held the job since 2006, has loomed over the industry. According to the latest reports, Apple is preparing to unleash an AI avalanche on iPhones at its upcoming WWDC 2024, and this will include some cloud-based as well as on-device AI models, but it will be through the lens of easily the most well-known and widest-reaching AI developers around today, OpenAI. The United States Food and Drug Administration is allowing Neuralink to implant its brain chip into a second person after the company fixed issues it faced in the first patient. The report of the FDA allowing Elon Musk's company to move forward comes from the Wall Street Journal. While Musk's Neuralink will now move forward, it almost saw its trial that began in January cut short after the company shared that 65 threads had detached from the first patient's brain, causing the chip to malfunction. In response to the persistent inflation that has forced Americans to pay more for groceries than ever before, Target has announced it will slash prices for more than 1,500 popular items beginning immediately. The Minneapolis-based retailer shared the news, saying that thousands more price cuts are in the pipeline and that when all is said and done, around 5,000 items will see their stickers slashed. Walmart also recently launched a new food brand aimed at attracting young consumers looking for deals that don't have any ties to current brands. The new brand is called Better Goods. It's being rolled out nationwide this year with 300 new products. Walmart shared that items will range in price from $2 to $15, with most of them coming in around $5. Nestle will market a new $5 line of frozen pizzas and protein-enriched pastas in the United States, which it says it designed specifically for people taking drugs such as Wegovy or Ozempic for weight loss. The world's biggest food company, which sells DiGiorno pizza and Stouffer's meals to major grocers, said it developed the new products with more protein, iron, and calcium for people taking the wildly popular appetite-suppressing drugs called GLP-1 agonists. To show love for all the grandmothers out there, McDonald's is releasing a brand new dessert item today. The Grandma McFlurry debuts for a limited time today. McDonald's says the dessert is sweet, just like Grandma, and features features a delicious syrup and chopped crunchy candy pieces like the favorite treat that Grandma hid in her purse. Elvis Presley's iconic Graceland home may be put up for public auction, but the rock legend's granddaughter, Riley Keough, is fighting the sale and has filed a lawsuit claiming fraud. A public notice for the foreclosure sale of the Memphis estate was posted earlier this month, and the notice alleges that Promenade Trust, which controls Graceland at 3734 Elvis Presley Boulevard, owes $3.8 million after failing to repay a loan taken out in 2018. And the actress and heir to the famed property is attempting to block the sale of Graceland, and that is Elvis Presley's granddaughter and heir to Graceland, calling a foreclosure sale fraudulent. Cyber attacks against water utilities across the country are becoming more frequent and more severe, according to the EPA, as it issued an enforcement alert urging water systems to take immediate actions to protect the nation's drinking water. About 70% of utilities inspected by federal officials over the last year violated standards meant to prevent breaches or other intrusions. Saudia Group, the parent company of Saudi Arabia's national airline Saudia and its budget carrier Flyadeal, has placed an order for 105 new Airbus jets from the A320neo family. And we do have AstraZeneca aiming to almost double sales to $80 billion by the year 2030 as Chief Executive Officer Pascal Soriot seeks to cement his legacy at the British drug maker that he helped to save through a bet on cancer treatments. The company, which generated $45.8 billion in revenue last year, will launch 20 new medicines by the end of the decade to meet the new total revenue target. The Philippines is setting its sights on becoming the next manufacturing and logistics hub in Asia, according to President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., as Manila capitalizes on its growing ties with Washington. Sorry, the screen is now up. No more snapping cute photos of Mount Fuji from a popular sidewalk spot in the Japanese town. Known as a place that offers some of the best views of the iconic Japanese mountain, the town last month started erecting a large black screen on a stretch of a street to block the view and deter tourists from overcrowding the place. And a particularly popular photo location outside a Lawson convenience store, from where a photograph taken at a particular angle would make it seem as if Mount Fuji was sitting atop the store roof. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said that the U.S. and Europe need to respond to China's industrial policies in a strategic and united way to keep manufacturers viable on both sides of the Atlantic. In remarks on the importance of the U.S.-European alliance in Frankfurt, she said China's excess industrial capacity threatens both America and European firms, as well as the industrial development of emerging market countries. China is rapidly advancing its homegrown Baidu satellite navigation system, aiming to bolster its market presence both domestically and internationally. India's rank on the World Economic Forum's Travel and Tourism Development Index 2024 has risen to 39th place, with global tourism activities returning to pre-pandemic levels. While the U.S. topped the list, India is ranked highest in South Asia and among the lower middle-income economies. India was ranked 54th in the previously published index in 2021. And Forbes has recently unveiled the 9th edition of its prestigious 30 Under 30 Asia list. This year's edition puts a spotlight on 300 inspiring individuals under the age of 30 who are shaping the future across 10 key sectors. From art and entertainment to healthcare and social impact, these innovators are pushing boundaries and making waves across the Asia-Pacific region. India has made a rare request to its state-run oil refineries and private processor Reliance Industries to jointly negotiate a long-term supply deal with Russia. The government wants its refiners to lock in at least a third of their contracted supply from Russia at a fixed discount to help shield the nation's economy from volatile prices. The Schengen visa fee has hiked. If you're planning a trip to Europe, it's important to take note of the hike in Schengen visa fees. Starting from the 11th of June, the European Commission will raise Schengen visa fees. The Slovenian Ministry of Foreign and European Affairs verified that the cost for adult applicants will increase from £80 to 90, while fees for children aged 6 to 12 will rise from 40 to 45 euros. The surge in Indian equity derivatives that's driven up volumes to the highest in the world is spurring concern among the nation's policymakers that the frenzy may hurt efforts to harness household savings for productive purposes. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman and Chief Economic Advisor Anant Nageshwaran sounded caution in recent days about growing retail participation in the equity futures and options market. The Indian stock market has achieved a remarkable feat by generating $1 trillion in wealth within a span of 6 months. Today, it entered the prestigious $5 trillion club for the first time, despite facing FII pullout ahead of the Lok Sabha election results on the 4th of June. And India may consider cutting its bond sales this year, aided by a higher cash balance. We do have a boom in tiny IPO offerings in India that may soon be followed by larger deals, broadening options for global investors looking to join the nation's equities frenzy. Citigroup Inc., the top arranger of equity offerings in India this year, sees 4 to 5 IPOs of at least $1 billion each over the next year. At least 10 companies are weighing offerings of more than $100 million. And Indian equity benchmark indices, BSE, Sensex, and the Nifty 50 opened in the red this morning. While they dipped over 100 points, the Nifty 50 was down over 15 points. Infosys founder N.R. Narayanamurthy believes that generative artificial intelligence, like any other technology, will help improve human productivity. A strong advocate of technology, he's addressed the concerns surrounding the potential misuse and job loss associated with the latest technological disruption, Gen AI. State-owned Oil India reported its highest ever quarterly net profit in the March quarter, helped by higher oil production and better prices. India Cements reported a narrowing of consolidated net loss to nearly 50 crore rupees in the fourth quarter. And Mahindra Financial Services today said it has appointed Mahesh Rajaraman as Chief Risk Officer of the company with effect from the 1st of August this year. In a regulatory filing, Mahindra Finance said Malika Mittal has tendered her resignation and ceased to be the CRO of the company with effect from the 17th of this month. And Sanjeev Puri, the chairman and managing director of ITC, has assumed office as the president of industry lobby group CII for 24-25. Pakistan and Turkey set their sights on enhancing annual bilateral trade to $5 billion, besides intensifying their defense collaboration as the two countries prepared for their upcoming high-level bilateral summit. Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Ishak Dar was speaking at the Foreign Office after a meeting with visiting Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan, has said that the two sides agreed on increasing trade to $5 billion in 3 years. In a landmark development, a Nadra-owned company in collaboration with the National Radio and Telecommunication Corporation is set to unveil 2 cutting-edge indigenous biometric solutions at a conference in South Africa next week. And the banks made record investments of 7.6 trillion Pakistani rupees during the year, mostly in risk-free and lucrative government papers, while advances during the same period declined instead of increasing. The power regulator has approved a 7-year plan for K Electric, under which the company will increase its generation capacity by about 3,200 megawatts, mostly through renewable energy. And Law Minister Azam Nazir Tarar said Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has set up a special committee to forge political consensus on the bill for the establishment of a digital media authority in the country. The Cabinet Committee on State-Owned Enterprises made a significant decision approving the Power Division's proposal for the nomination of independent directors for specific electricity distribution companies. And the government has sought the National Electric Power Regulatory Authority, NEPRA's approval for an additional fuel cost adjustment of $3.50 per unit to extract over 29 billion rupees from consumers for electricity they consumed last month. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all I have in the financial news for you. I do have the final segment of the program coming up when we'll get you some stories from the annals of history that happened on today's date, which is the 21st of May. Stay with us. Today, ladies and gentlemen, is the 21st of May, and wishing you all a lovely Tuesday. It's still severe weather season, and there's a threat for isolated storms today also, but especially tomorrow and Thursday, all modes of severe weather are possible, as well as areas of flooding. We hit 91 yesterday. We also hit that number on Saturday and Sunday, so why not hit it again today, right? We'll get the morning clouds out of here this morning, and I'm expecting plenty of sunshine with a strong breeze and plenty of humidity. I can't rule out a late day shower or storm mainly west of our area. If any do break the cap, it'll go severe quickly. Good news is there'll be few and far between. But tomorrow and Thursday could get pretty dicey around here. A cold front will sag into the area tomorrow afternoon and evening, producing scattered storms, and some of these will become severe with hail, wind, and an isolated tornado in the areas. Not everyone will see these severe storms, and afternoon highs will still top out near 90 degrees. So some stories from the annals of history that happened on today's date. In Washington, D.C., humanitarians Clara Barton and Adolphus Solomons found the American National Red Cross, an organization established to provide humanitarian aid to victims of wars and natural disasters in congruence with the International Red Cross, happened on today's date in 1881. The American Red Cross was founded. And on the 21st of May in 1901, Connecticut becomes the first state to pass a law regulating motor vehicles, limiting their speed to 12 miles per hour in cities and 15 miles per hour on country roads. This was done in 1901. Speed limits had been set earlier also in the U.S. for non-motorized vehicles. And we do have the colony of New Amsterdam, which is now New York, issuing a decree stating that no wagons, carts, or sleighs shall be run, rode, or driven at a gallop, at the risk of incurring a fine starting at £2 or about $150 in today's currency. So that was Connecticut enacting this first speed limit law on today's date in the year 1901. Concerns about fuel availability and cost later subsided, and in 1987, Congress allowed states to increase the speed limits on rural interstates to 65 miles per hour. That happened in 1987. The National Highway System Designation Act of 1995 repealed the maximum speed limit, and this returned control of setting speed limits to the states, many of which soon raised the limits to 70 miles per hour and higher on a portion of their roads, including rural and urban interstates and limited access roads. And then American pilot Charles Lindbergh lands at the Le Bourget field in Paris, successfully completing the first solo non-stop transatlantic flight and the first ever non-stop flight between New York to Paris. His single-engine monoplane, the Spirit of St. Louis, had lifted off from the Roosevelt field in New York 33 and a half hours before. Charles Augustus Lindbergh lands in Paris on today's date in the year 1927. His autobiographical works include We, The Spirit of St. Louis, and the wartime journals of Charles Lindbergh. Dwight Eisenhower in 1954 appointed him Brigadier General in the Air Force Reserve. He died in Hawaii in 1974, but completed the first solo non-stop transatlantic flight on today's date when he landed at Le Bourget field in Paris in 1927. 5 years to the day that this American aviator Charles Lindbergh became the first pilot to accomplish that solo non-stop flight across the Atlantic Ocean, female aviator Amelia Earhart becomes the first pilot to repeat the feat, landing her plane in Ireland after flying across the North Atlantic. She traveled over 2,000 miles from Newfoundland to just under 15 hours. This happened 5 years later in 1932. Unlike Charles Lindbergh, she was well known to the public before her solo transatlantic flight. As a member of a three-person crew, she had become the first woman to cross the Atlantic in an aircraft, and although her only function during the crossing was to keep the plane's log, the event won her national fame, and Americans were enamored with the daring and modest young pilot. For her solo transatlantic crossing in 1932, she was awarded a Distinguished Flying Cross by the U.S. Congress. In 1935, in the first flight of its kind, she flew solo from Wheeler Island in Honolulu in Hawaii to Oakland, California, winning a $10,000 award posted by Hawaiian commercial interests, and 2 years later attempted, along with co-pilot Frederick Noonan, to fly around the world, but her plane disappeared near Howland Island in the South Pacific. In 1937, the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Itasca picked up radio messages that she was lost and low in fuel, the last the world ever heard about Amelia Earhart. And then on the 21st of May, in 1940, a special unit carries out its mission and begins murdering more than 1,500 hospital patients in East Prussia. The massacre lasted until the 6th of June. Nazis began killing unfit people in East Prussia. Mentally ill patients from throughout East Prussia had been transferred to the district of Soldau. A special military unit, basically a hit squad, carried out its agenda and killed the patients over an 18-day period, one small part of the larger Nazi program to exterminate everyone deemed unfit by its ideology. And after the murders, the unit reported back to the headquarters in Berlin that the patients had been successfully evacuated. This Nazi killing of unfit people in East Prussia started on today's date in the year 1940. And the U.S. conducts the first airborne test of an improved hydrogen bomb, dropping it from a plane over the tiny island of Namu in the Bikini Atoll in the Pacific Ocean on the 21st of May in 1956. And because of the time difference, actually, it was still the 20th of May in the U.S. The successful test indicated that hydrogen bombs were viable airborne weapons and that the arms race had taken another giant leap forward. The U.S. began testing nuclear weapons at Bikini Atoll in 1946. However, early bombs were large and unwieldy affairs that were exploded from the ground. The practical application of dropping the weapon over an enemy had been a mere theoretical possibility until a successful test in May of 1956 on today's date, the 21st of May. This massive open-air blast caused concerns among scientists and environmentalists about the effects of such testing on human and animal life. And during the coming years, a growing movement in the U.S. and elsewhere began to push for a ban on open-air atomic testing. The Limited Test Ban Treaty, signed in 1963 by the U.S., the Soviet Union, and Greater Britain, prohibited open-air and underwater nuclear testing. And on the 21st of May 1960, the first tremor of a series hits Valdivia in Chile. By the time they end, the quakes and their after effects kill 5,000 people and leave another 2 million homeless. Registering a magnitude of 7.6, the first earthquake was powerful and killed several people. It turned out to be only a foreshock, however, to the one of the most powerful tremors ever recorded. At 3:11 p.m. that day, an 8.5 magnitude quake rocked southern Chile. The epicenter of this tremendous shaking was just off the coast under the Pacific Ocean. After leaving Chile, this tsunami traveled hundreds of miles west towards Hawaii, the Philippines, and Japan, where hundreds also died. In fact, the waves set off by this earthquake bounced back and forth across the Pacific Ocean for a week. Aftershocks were recorded for a full 30 days after that main tremor. The streak is over. Suzanne Lucci announces Shemar Moore of The Young and the Restless on this night in 1999, right before presenting the Daytime Emmy Award for Best Actress to the tearful star of ABC's All My Children. The award was Lucci's first win in 19 straight years of being nominated in the Best Actress category for her portrayal of Erica Kane. And, of course, All My Children cast and crew and fans were there, and she closed her speech by announcing, "I'm going to go back to that studio and I'm going to play Erica Kane for all she's worth." In addition to her work on All My Children, she guest starred repeatedly on the primetime soap opera Dallas during the 1990s and has appeared in a number of TV movies and series. The soap star wins her first Emmy after 19 nominations on today's date in 1999. And on the 21st of May in the year 2000, The bones of President James Garfield's spine are on display for a final day at the National Museum of Health and Medicine in Washington, D.C. This exhibit featured medical oddities from the museum's archives. The British medical journal The Lancet published a story about the exhibit. Among many other medical curiosities, the display featured President Garfield's spinal column that showed exactly where 1 out of 2 assassins' bullets had passed through it in 1881. The first bullet had grazed his arm. The second bullet lodged below his pancreas. Alexander Graham Bell, who was one of Garfield's physicians at the time, tried to use an early version of a metal detector to find the second bullet, but failed. Historical accounts vary slightly as to the exact cause of his death. Physicians may have given him treatments that hastened his demise, including the administering of quinine, morphine, brandy, and calomel. He was also fed through the rectum. Others insist that Garfield died from an already advanced case of heart disease and the trauma of the shooting exacerbated. Autopsy reports described how pressure from the festering pancreatic wound created a fatal aneurysm. Regardless, he succumbed to complications from his wounds 80 days after being shot. His spine is not the only presidential body part to have been an item of interest at the National Museum of Health and Medicine. The museum also owns some of Lincoln's skull fragments and President Eisenhower's gallstones. A museum in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania keeps a tumor removed from President Grover Cleveland, and John F. Kennedy's brain, which was removed during his autopsy after his assassination in Dallas in 1963, disappeared and has never been found. Ladies and gentlemen, those were some stories from the annals of history that happened on today's date, the 21st of May. For those of you who would like to reach me directly, my number is 214-675-1754. And that's my show for today.